Well, we're speaking today with U.S. Magistrate Judge Robert C. Mitchell, and according to the information that I was given, you were born in New York City on August 4th, 1940. Is that
That's
correct?
correct.
Good. Can you give us, to start off with, a little background on your parents?
Okay, my father was a civil engineer and my mother was a secretary.
And what was their level of, well, your
My,
father was obviously went to college if he was a
right,
civil
he
engineer.
was he had a master's in engineering, and my mother was a high school graduate. I attended the New York City public schools. Um, we had family, friends, everything within the New York City area.
What sort of values do you think your parents instilled in you growing up?
Hard work, ethics, um, not to expect anything to be handed to me.
When you were real young, did you have any interest in the law, any inclination you might have gone into the law?
I always did, in the sense that I was always very inquisitive about things. Talked an awful lot. I remember, well, my parents had related to me that the house painter asked them to get me out of the house just because he couldn't stand me talking all the time.
You were probably something of a reader, I imagine.
Avid reader and still continue that.
And you attended Dartmouth.
Dartmouth, that's right.
How did you end up going there?
It was just the complete antithesis of growing up in a big city. I had been accepted at a number of schools. My dad and I went and looked at them, and I just liked the complete rural life that Dartmouth offered.
Did that experience shape you particularly?
Um, I think it taught me, besides the educational aspects of it, it taught me to appreciate natural beauty, number one. Number two, to take advantage of cultural activities that were available, say like in New York, which, growing up there, I didn't take much advantage of a lot of them just because there were so many. Whereas at Dartmouth, there was a lack of many of these things, so that I appreciated what was available, and that has carried through. We attend the opera here, we attend the symphony, we attend the public theater. I think the faculty was just outstanding. It didn't matter whether it was in the sciences, foreign language, history, social studies, whatever it might be. They were just an outstanding group of people.
Did you have a pretty strong leaning towards the law at that point?
At that time, I wasn't sure whether I wanted the law or to go into sciences, specifically medicine, and then I ultimately opted to go towards law. But I had this strong educational background in both the sciences and the liberal arts.
You earned a degree, an AB, in 1962, and then you
Correct.
went on to the University of Pittsburgh. Why did you go there?
I happen to like Pittsburgh. I had one of my roommates was from Pittsburgh. I had family here, and Pittsburgh seemed to be sort of a happy compromise between big metropolitan New York and totally rural Hanover, New Hampshire. And I have not regretted that decision in any way.
And you earned two degrees at the University of Pittsburgh.
That's correct. I have an MBA and a LLB JD degree.
What do you remember about your legal studies there?
I found them challenging. I enjoyed some of the classes, some of them I didn't like, but I think it was a great preparation for moving on ultimately to this position.
Was there a particular area of the law that interested you then?
I liked constitutional law. I like criminal law, which are things that I still continue to do.
Did you go into law practice right out of school?
I went into private practice for about a year.
That was 1967?
67,
Okay.
right, to 68. Then a vacancy opened as a law clerk down here with Judge Rosenberg, and I applied for it and was accepted. And I worked for Judge Rosenberg for about 3.5 years. And the chief judge of the district court approached me and asked me if I would be interested in what was then the magistrate's position, now magistrate judge. And I said yes, and I've been here since.
Talk about the judge as a judge and a person. What do you remember about him?
He was a very conscientious person. He worked hard. He demanded, hard work from his staff. He agonized over many decisions, ultimately made the decision, and then moved on. But, for my purposes, it served for such a broad exposure to federal litigation, which, of course, now I've been involved in for 30 plus years.
What do you think you learned most from him?
Just to keep an open mind, I think. Give everybody a fair opportunity to be heard, and ultimately to make a decision that is the best decision that I could make at the time. Not agonize at it over anymore and move on to the next matter. Okay, Judges Marsh and Sorg, I think Marsh was the chief judge at the time, but approached me because the magistrate judge's position was, or the magistrate's position was a new position established by Congress, and I think the first appointments here were in 1971. There were two positions. Bud Schaffler, who was one of the incumbents, accepted the position here as clerk of court. At that point, Judges Marsh and or Sorg, and I just don't remember in which order it was, approached me to see if I would be interested. I said yes. I applied for the position and was selected by the Board of Judges for appointment in February of 1972.
What skills do you think you had that made you a good fit for the job?
Well, first of all, I think I had good writing ability, good reasoning ability, and also the experience of 3.5 years exposure to federal litigation.
I know the duties have changed some over time. What were the scope of the duties of the magistrate at that point?
Okay, I think they've changed very dramatically. When I was first appointed, I think there were 72 magistrate judges or magistrates in the country. That's all the Congress had appointed. And each court used the magistrates as the courts saw fit. In our cases, we received all prisoner litigation and Social Security appeals. And plus we did the former commissioner's criminal duties, that is arrest warrants, search warrants, bail hearings, arraignments, etc. Since the early 70s, Congress greatly expanded the duties, now making it basically anything that's not inconsistent with the Constitution. The number of magistrate judges in the country has risen significantly. I can't tell you the number, but I'm going to guess somewhere around 800, somewhere around there. Plus, we have more magistrate judges here, and at this point, with the consent of the parties, we're handling all civil cases. We still continue to handle the preliminary criminal cases. But we've moved from what was originally perhaps more of a glorified law clerk position to being, I hope, contributing members of the judiciary.
What was your day-to-day work like at the start of your tenure here? What were the sort of things you were handling at the beginning?
At the beginning, we were handling all prisoner cases. That's habeas and prisoner civil rights. All Social Security appeals. We did not have law clerks at that time. We had one supporting personnel in the form of a secretary. And we did not make any dispositive decisions. We did reports and recommendations to the district judge on every case.
What was your relationship like with the rest of the judicial system at that point? I mean, did you see yourself as kind of like a somewhat elevated law clerk? Did you see yourself as a judge at that point?
I think when we first started, it was certainly more of a hybrid position. The philosophy being that we would be doing what law clerks couldn't do. And so in that respect, it was a step up, but still it was basically doing reports and recommendations to the district judges, in which case we were not making any final decisions, whereas now we're making final decisions. Of course, we were always hopeful the position would move forward as it has done.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, my training as a law clerk had prepared me very well for the job as a magistrate, since so much of the work was the same. Okay, but at this point, with the consent of the parties in any civil case, including personal cases, we function in the same capacity as a district judge, and the appeal goes to the Court of Appeals. So basically, the position was an instrument created by Congress to create more judicial officers at a lesser cost than creating more Article III judges.
What do you remember about those days, let's say the 1970s? Was the work interesting to you? Does anything stand out from your experiences during that
Well,
decade?
it was interesting in the respect that I had never been exposed to a great deal of criminal practice. Now, as a law clerk, we obviously had criminal trials, but not the preliminary matter searches and bail and things like that. So that was something new. The other work was more or less an expansion on what I had done in the past. And then, of course, as Congress has increased the duties and the courts have increased the duties, and the position has gotten more and more interesting. And I've got to say, we're fortunate here in that our court is very willing to permit us to do as much as we possibly can.
Looking back in the 70s, were there any particular criminal hearings or cases that you touched upon that stand out to you, that were interesting or that tried your decision-making ability any?
Well, let's put it this way. Coming from a rather sheltered background, growing up and educationally, it was a whole new world to move into the goings-on in the criminal proceedings. So in that respect, it was fascinating. Now, over time, the nature of the criminal charges has changed dramatically. When I first started, we'd get a lot of counterfeiting cases, not as much drug-related work, bootleg cases, and of course now, I don't remember the last time I saw a counterfeiting case, and bootleg, I don't know what happened to the moonshiners, but, well, we haven't seen them here.
Did you gain any insight into the criminal mind, do you think?
Other than recognition that I couldn't understand it. I mean, just some of the crimes, even to this date, seem so stupid that it's really hard to understand what people think, but then I guess they think differently or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
Did you welcome the changes in the expansion of, the duties?
Absolutely. We're at the point now where I'd say 90% of our work is civil, case dispositive, mediations. It's become much more challenging.
Over the years, would you say that you've developed an approach to the law that can be put into words?
I would say that basically every case we treat individually. We see if there's anything new or novel that needs to be addressed in them. A lot of them, turn out when you get down to the nitty-gritty to be rather routine and repetitive of other cases. But we try to give every case as fair a shake as we can, approach it with an open mind, and reach the best decision we can.
On the scale of severity, where would you say you come down? Would you say you're a severe judge, a little more humane?
I think humane. I don't know if the criminal defendants feel that way, but no, I think that at the end of the day, I say to myself, I think I did the right thing, and that's the end of it.
What do you think has been your most difficult decision, or are there several really difficult decisions you've had to make on the bench? I'd
suspect, probably from the standpoint of being on the bench, in the criminal realm of denying bail, in the sense that you're basically putting someone in jail before they've been convicted. And there's been a number of cases that have been very hard. Some of them just aren't. But there have been a number of them that have been very difficult, and I think that's the most wrenching decision because, you know, in a civil matter, it can be addressed on appeal if need be. With bail, there's the immediate incarceration, which might be reversed on appeal ultimately, but meanwhile the person has been locked up for a period of time.
Is there room for improvement in the system, the magistrate judge system?
I think there's always room for improvement in any system. Fortunately, we attend annual educational seminars where